The very air inside the Oak Ridge Community Subdivision always felt different, somehow heavier, more charged with an almost palpable, expectant energy before a significant weather event brewed to the west. Residents often spoke of it in hushed tones, a shared local folklore. But this particular Tuesday afternoon, the feeling was something else entirely, something sharper, more menacing. Ben Carter, standing stiffly by the wide bay window of his dedicated home office, a room filled with monitors, maps, and the quiet hum of electronics, could practically taste the sharp, metallic tang of ozone building in the humid, unstable air outside. It was a smell that always preceded intense electrical storms, a harbinger he respected. He watched the western sky intently, his gaze fixed on the horizon. It was transforming into a terrifying canvas of bruised, churning purple clouds layered over an unsettling, sickly, almost phosphorescent green, colors that screamed severe thunderstorm potential, and worse, tornadic development, to his highly trained meteorological eye. Nature's warning palette. His fingers, long and practiced from years of keyboard commands and data manipulation, danced rapidly across the ergonomic keyboard. He called up the latest series of Doppler radar scans from multiple surrounding NWS sites, KTLX, KHCT, KVNX, layering velocity data over base reflectivity, cross-referencing with satellite imagery showing the explosive cloud-top development. His brow, usually clear and composed when discussing weather phenomena calmly during television interviews or public safety briefings, was furrowed in deep, focused concentration. He zoomed in tightly on the storm cell nearest Oak Ridge, analyzing the complex, pixelated data streams, his mind rapidly processing sophisticated algorithms, pattern recognition cues, and atmospheric indices honed over 15 demanding years in the field. As the region's warning coordination meteorologist for the National Weather Service Forecast Office, Ben lived and breathed the intricate dance of complex atmospheric dynamics. His critical job, the one that often kept him up at night, was translation, converting dense, often chaotic torrents of raw meteorological data into clear, concise, actionable, potentially life-saving information. Information desperately needed by county emergency managers coordinating responses, by first responders heading into the path of danger, by broadcast media outlets relaying warnings to the public, and ultimately, by every single person relying on those warnings for their safety. The weight of that responsibility felt immense today. Today, the incoming data wasn't just politely suggesting danger. It was screaming it at the absolute top of its digital lungs, demanding attention, demanding action. Rotation signatures, the telltale Doppler velocity couplets indicating a rapidly spinning updraft within the supercell thunderstorm, the mesocyclone capable of producing a strong tornado, were tightening alarmingly on the screen with each new radar sweep, every agonizing 4 minutes. A menacing hook echo, the classic radar presentation of a powerful, well-organized mesocyclone ingesting warm, moist air, was curling like a predator's claw just a handful of miles southwest of their supposedly tranquil suburban development. It was sharp, well-defined, textbook, and its projected path, extrapolated meticulously by the latest storm motion vectors calculated by the radar algorithms, was tracking directly, inexorably, towards the heart of Oak Ridge. This wasn't a maybe anymore. This wasn't a watch. This was happening. Now, his 9-year-old daughter, Mia, suddenly zoomed into the quiet tension of the office with the familiar, soft whir of her customized power wheelchair. Her bright pink joystick handle, adorned with unicorn stickers, provided a cheerful, almost incongruous contrast to the serious, focused expression mirroring her father's on her young face. Cerebral palsy affected the motor control in her legs, necessitating the chair for mobility since toddlerhood, but it hadn't touched her sharp, inquisitive mind or her infectious, often boundless enthusiasm for understanding the world around her, especially her father's world of weather. She'd grown up with complex weather maps as a constant backdrop, a background hum to her childhood narrative. "Is it a really big one, Daddy?" she asked, her voice quiet but clear. She parked her chair expertly beside his, her eyes immediately scanning the complex, colorful radar display on his largest monitor with an impressive understanding gleaned from years of patiently explained weather phenomena, shared storm-chasing documentaries, and visits to the NWS operations floor. She knew the dangerous colors, the bright reds and greens signifying intense rotation. She knew the threatening shapes, the hook echo, the debris ball signature. "It looks pretty serious, sweet pea," Ben said, making a conscious effort to keep his voice calm, even modulated, despite the adrenaline starting to surge hotly through his own system, prickling unpleasantly under his skin. He had to be the calm center now, both as a meteorologist about to face a direct impact on his own community and, more importantly, as a father protecting his child. "We definitely need to head towards the community safe room very, very soon. Right now, actually." He pointed a steady finger towards the tight, intense velocity couplet displayed prominently on the screen. The area where bright crimson pixels, indicating strong winds moving rapidly away from the radar site, slammed right up against adjacent bright lime green pixels, indicating equally strong winds moving rapidly towards the radar site. "See that little tight spot right there? That very bright gate-to-gate shear? That tells us the storm is spinning incredibly fast inside, like a giant top. That's the engine for a tornado." He explained it simply, factually, as he always did, respecting her intelligence and her capacity to handle information without undue panic. "Time to move to our safe place, kiddo. Let's go." Chloe, Ben's wife, a pragmatic and capable architect whose calm, grounded demeanor often served as the necessary ballast to his sometimes overwhelming scientific intensity, appeared silently in the office doorway, her presence immediately calming. Her face was pale, drawn beneath her usual composure, but her eyes were steady, focused, ready. She held up two familiar, well-packed duffel bags, their emergency go bags. "Go bags are right here, by the front door," she announced quietly but firmly. "I grabbed the crank weather radio, the extra batteries, and the first aid kit, just in case." She knew the drill as well as he did, perhaps better in some practical ways. Preparedness wasn't just a concept in their family. It was an ingrained habit, a necessary baseline underscored constantly by the realities of Ben's profession and their location in a tornado-prone region. The communal storm shelter, Oak Ridge Community's designated safe haven during severe weather events like this one, was a squat, unassuming, largely windowless building constructed of heavily reinforced, 12-inch thick concrete walls and roof. It was partially bermed into a small artificial rise near the sprawling community center and the now-empty swimming pool complex. It wasn't aesthetically pleasing. Its stark, utilitarian design was a frequent target of complaints from Patricia Dunn and the HOA's perpetually dissatisfied beautification committee, but its structural integrity, designed to withstand extreme winds and impacts, was paramount, its sole reason for existence. Its most crucial design feature, however, especially vital for the Carter family and several other residents with mobility challenges, was the wide, gently sloping concrete ramp leading directly, barrier-free, up to the heavy, vault-like, pressure-sealed steel door. This ramp was the structure's only designated accessible entrance, mandated explicitly by federal ADA regulations during its planning and construction 5 years prior, after considerable debate forced by disability advocates. They'd practiced the family emergency evacuation drill countless times over the years, timing themselves meticulously, refining the process. Mia expertly navigating her responsive power chair down the smooth, wide incline while Ben or Chloe secured the heavy, lever-operated steel door behind them, ensuring the seal engaged properly. Practice made permanent, Ben always reminded them. Muscle memory was crucial in a crisis. Just as the first mournful, deeply unsettling rising and falling wail of the Oak Ridge network of tornado sirens began to slice through the heavy, humid, pre-storm stillness, echoing eerily across the increasingly anxious neighborhood, Ben's smartphone buzzed sharply, vibrating insistently in his pocket. The official wireless emergency alert, WEA, triggered automatically by the NWS warning issuance, confirmed his worst fears, flashing across the screen in stark white text on a black background. Tornado warning for Oak Ridge Community and surrounding areas, including Northwood Hills and Riverbend, until 4:45 p.m. Central Daylight Time. National Weather Service Doppler radar confirmed large and extremely dangerous tornado near Route 12 and Highway 7 intersection, moving northeast at 35 miles per hour. This is a particularly dangerous situation. Seek shelter immediately in a basement or interior room on the lowest floor. Mobile homes will be destroyed. Based on the rapidly evolving radar signature, particularly the emergence of a clear tornadic debris signature, TDS, indicating wreckage being lofted thousands of feet into the air, Ben mentally upgraded his internal assessment. Strong YEF 2 intensity seemed almost certain now, maybe even flirting with the lower bounds of YEF 3 potential, especially if it maintained its current structure. Estimated arrival of the leading edge of the potentially damaging winds in their specific section of Oak Ridge, maybe 15 minutes, probably less now, perhaps only 10, if it accelerated slightly, as these storms often did. 10 minutes, 600 seconds. To get dozens of families, panicked children, mobility-impaired elderly residents, frightened pets, themselves, across the exposed lawns and sidewalks to the safety of the reinforced concrete structure. A palpable wave of raw panic began to ripple visibly through the community now. Doors slammed shut nearby with startling loudness. Car engines coughed to life, sputtering uncertainly, then abruptly died as drivers belatedly realized that driving away from a tornado, especially with limited escape routes, was futile, dangerous, potentially fatal. Figures hurried, almost ran, down sidewalks, clutching small, terrified pets wrapped in blankets, hastily grabbed essential document folders, bewildered toddlers dragged along by anxious parents. The collective anxiety was a tangible thing, thick and heavy in the air alongside the metallic scent of ozone. Ben, Chloe, and Mia merged into the growing stream of anxious residents heading urgently towards the community center lawn. The wind was picking up noticeably now, gusting strongly, whipping loose leaves, twigs, discarded wrappers, and stray, fat raindrops around them in chaotic, unpredictable eddies. Breathing felt slightly harder. The sky to the southwest was darkening with terrifying rapidity now, taking on that ugly, bruised, almost greenish-black tinge that veteran storm chasers recognized instantly as a sign of extreme danger. Hail, rotation, imminent tornadic activity. It made the hairs on the back of Ben's neck stand on end, an involuntary, primal response. They rounded the final corner onto the community center's wide, exposed lawn, the low, bunker-like profile of the concrete refuge building finally in clear view, perhaps only 50 or 60 yards away across the wet grass. A surge of profound relief washed over Ben for a fleeting, precious second. They were close. They would make it. And then they stopped dead in their tracks, all three of them, their forward momentum faltering simultaneously. Disbelief instantly warred with a sickening wave of rising panic in Ben's chest. It couldn't be. A large, gleaming, immaculately clean white luxury SUV, Patricia Dunn's unmistakable vehicle, was parked squarely, deliberately, uncompromisingly, at the very top of the wide concrete access ramp. It completely, utterly blocked the sole accessible pathway leading to the heavy steel shelter door. Its expensive tires were positioned with almost insulting precision directly astride the clearly painted blue International Accessibility symbol on the concrete. Patricia Dunn herself, HOA board member, current chair of the all-powerful Parking Enforcement Subcommittee, and widely acknowledged self-appointed queen of Oak Ridge regulations, at least, those regulations she chose to enforce selectively, often to her own benefit, was meticulously, almost performatively, pulling a large, obviously expensive designer handbag and a small, fluffy white dog that looked more like a pampered, yapping tribble than an actual canine, from the plush leather passenger seat. She seemed utterly oblivious, or perhaps worse, deliberately indifferent, to the deafening sirens, the rapidly darkening sky spitting rain, the panicked residents hurrying past her with frightened expressions. "Patricia!" Ben shouted, his voice strained, needing to be raised significantly to carry over the rising shriek of the gusting wind and the insistent, cyclical wail of the nearby tornado sirens. "You have to move your car? Right now? People need the ramp to get in." Patricia turned slowly, leisurely, towards the sound of his voice, her expression transitioning rapidly from vague surprise at being addressed so loudly to immediate, familiar, defensive annoyance. Her perfectly coiffed, salon-fresh blonde hair, clearly the result of a recent expensive appointment, was already starting to frizz unattractively in the moist, electrically charged air, stray strands whipping around her face. A look of practiced, condescending hauteur settled firmly on her features. "Don't you dare raise your voice or use that tone with me, Ben Carter," she retorted sharply, her voice surprisingly cutting through the wind. She paused to adjust the tiny, sparkling jeweled collar on her incessantly yapping dog, holding it close. "And furthermore, don't you tell me where I can and cannot park my vehicle. This is clearly the closest, most convenient spot to the community center main entrance door over there." She gestured vaguely towards the glass doors 50 feet away. "I always park right here for board meetings. Proximity and convenience are key, as you should know." She seemed to imply her needs superseded the unfolding emergency. "There's a tornado warning, Patricia," Chloe yelled, stepping forward instinctively, her voice tight with urgency, positioning herself slightly in front of Mia, as if to shield her from both the weather and Patricia's dismissive attitude. A stronger gust carrying a stinging spray of cold rain hit them. "A confirmed tornado. We have maybe minutes left. Mia needs that ramp to get into the shelter. It's the only accessible way in." Patricia glanced dismissively, fleetingly, without real interest, towards Mia's state-of-the-art power chair, her thin lips tightening slightly in disapproval, as if the chair itself were an affront. Then her gaze flickered back possessively, almost lovingly, towards her expensive, gleaming white SUV, parked so perfectly, so arrogantly, blocking the crucial access point for numerous residents. "Well, isn't that just inconvenient timing for you and yours?" she replied, her voice dripping with poorly concealed condescension that wasn't entirely masked by the howling wind. "However, there are perfectly good concrete steps over there." She gestured vaguely again, without actually looking, towards the far side of the bunker building, where a short flight of steep concrete stairs led down to a secondary, smaller, clearly non-accessible utility door, likely locked from the outside anyway. "Perhaps your daughter should have thought about utilizing alternative access routes. People simply can't always be expecting special favors and preferential treatment, disrupting established parking protocols and inconveniencing everyone else just because it suits their particular situation." The implication was clear. Mia's disability, Mia's need for access, was an inconvenience to Patricia's parking preference. "Special favors?" Ben echoed, his voice dangerously low now, tight with a sudden, white-hot incredulity. He could feel his hands clenching hard into fists at his sides. The wind tore violently at his light jacket, whipping it open. Looking southwest over Patricia's shoulder, he could see the sky darkening with terrifying speed, transforming into an ugly, churning, greenish-black cauldron boiling on the horizon. The storm structure was ominous, terrifyingly well-defined now. His professional mind registered the rapidly increasing, brightening debris signature on the radar feed. He could mentally picture, stark confirmation the vortex was already violently on the ground nearby, already causing significant damage, already lofting large pieces of wreckage high into the storm's powerful updraft. Time was no longer measured in minutes, but likely seconds. They were out of time. "Patricia, that ramp is an accessible entrance required by federal law. It's not a favor. And there's a confirmed, dangerous tornado bearing down on us right now. Move the damned vehicle before you get people killed." "Absolutely not," Patricia snapped, her voice rising defiant. She clutched her shivering, still yapping dog even more protectively to her chest, as if shielding it from his anger rather than the approaching storm. "I flatly refuse to lose my prime parking spot, a spot I am entitled to as a board member, just because you failed to plan properly for your daughter's unique situation. It's probably just a little bit of wind and heavy rain anyway." She sniffed disdainfully, turning slightly away from him again, pointedly dismissing his expertise, the official warnings, the sirens, the terrifying sky, the pleas of her neighbors, with a breathtaking, suicidal arrogance. UNWS meteorologists are always exaggerating the danger. It's never as bad as you predict. Ben felt a surge of cold, focused fury utterly eclipsed the fear for a moment. His training, his instinct for documentation in critical situations, kicked in instantly. He pulled out his smartphone again, his fingers surprisingly steady despite the wind buffeting him as he swiped instinctively to the camera app and hit the prominent red record button. angling the phone deliberately to capture the entire scene. Patricia standing stubbornly by her gleaming white SUV, which was brazenly, illegally blocking the vital ramp. The anxious, frightened faces of numerous neighbors gathering nearby, effectively trapped outside the refuge, and the increasingly menacing, turbulent, greenish-black sky looming ominously behind them. Evidence. Patricia, he said, his voice now amplified, projecting clearly, carrying the full weight of his professional authority and the gravity of the moment. It trembled slightly, not just from the buffeting wind, but from the sheer, shocking disbelief at her callous, potentially lethal indifference to human life unfolding before his eyes. I am officially informing you, as the Oak Ridge Warning Coordination meteorologist, and as a concerned resident, that you are actively, knowingly obstructing access to a designated public emergency shelter during a officially declared tornado warning situation. Move your vehicle immediately, or you will be held legally and morally responsible for endangering the lives of every single resident unable to access this shelter because of your deliberate actions. He held the phone steady, recording her reaction. "Don't you dare threaten me, Ben Carter," she shrieked back, her voice rising shrilly in pitch, laced now perhaps with a flicker of genuine fear as more neighbors started shouting angrily at her, pleading with her to move the car. "I know the HOA bylaws better than anyone. Parking enforcement is strictly an HOA jurisdiction. You have absolutely no authority." Her defiant, nonsensical words were abruptly, violently drowned out by a sudden, deafening roar. It wasn't just wind anymore. It was a deep, visceral, guttural sound that seemed to emanate from the very bowels of the earth, vibrating deep within their chests, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The wind shifted direction violently, instantly, slamming into them with renewed ferocity, driving stinging, blinding rain almost horizontally, making it nearly impossible to see, painful to even try to breathe. Mature trees nearby began to bend at alarming, unnatural angles, their trunks groaning audibly under the immense strain, thick branches snapping off like matchsticks. Debris, no longer just leaves and twigs, but now larger, heavier objects torn violently from nearby houses and yards. Entire sheets of plywood siding, pieces of plastic fencing twisted like ribbon candy, a child's metal swing set tumbling end over end, jagged shards of glass, started to fly lethally through the air with terrifying, unpredictable velocity. The tornado was closer, much, much closer, than even his most recent frantic mental estimate. It was almost directly upon them. The air pressure plummeted, making ears pop painfully. "Forget arguing. We have to move it ourselves. Now," yelled Bill Henderson, the burly, broad-shouldered retired firefighter who lived down the street, his powerful voice cutting instinctively through the rising chaos and panic. He didn't wait for consensus or permission. He acted. "Everyone who can, put your backs into it. Push." Ben shoved his still-recording phone deep into his securely zipped jacket pocket. He, Bill Henderson, and 3 other strong-looking male neighbors immediately threw their shoulders, their combined full weight, their desperate strength, against the heavy, unyielding side panel of the luxury SUV. Patricia screamed piercingly, a sound of pure fury and violated entitlement. "Get away from my car, you hooligans. You'll scratch the custom paint. It's Italian leather inside. It cost more than your houses. I'll sue every single one of you. This is assault. Vandalism." The heavy, wide tires skidded slightly, reluctantly, on the wet pavement, resisting their frantic efforts. The vehicle felt impossibly heavy, rooted to the spot, an immovable object against the truly irresistible force of the rapidly approaching storm core. Cold rain plastered their hair to their faces, stinging their eyes mercilessly, making it incredibly hard to get any kind of traction on the slick, muddy grass beside the ramp. The roar intensified exponentially, becoming a deafening, terrifying, all-encompassing freight train sound passing directly overhead, punctuated by the high-pitched shrieking of twisting metal. Visibility dropped to near zero in the swirling rain and debris. "Heave!" Bill Henderson grunted again, his face contorted with sheer physical effort, veins standing out on his thick neck. With one final, collective, desperate surge of adrenaline-fueled strength born of pure survival instinct, The heavy SUV slid sideways with a loud screech of tortured rubber, maybe 2 feet, perhaps 3 at most, just barely enough to clear a narrow, precarious pathway on the left side of the concrete access slope. It was just enough. Go, go, go. Get inside. Now, Ben yelled, immediately abandoning the car and grabbing the sturdy handles on the back of Mia's power chair, pushing with all his might. Chloe was already at the front wheel, pulling, guiding. Mia, her face pale but remarkably composed, her small hands firmly gripping her joystick, skillfully navigated the now partially clear section of the steepening incline, her movements precise, practiced even under the most extreme duress. She didn't panic. Other terrified residents, seeing the narrow opening appear, surged forward immediately behind them like water bursting through a collapsing dam. A frantic, desperate scramble of bodies, parents shielding children, elderly neighbors helped along, everyone pushing towards the relative safety of the reinforced concrete sanctuary. Ben, Bill, and the other exhausted helpers who had pushed the vehicle tumbled in last, breathless, soaked to the bone, muscles screaming, slamming the incredibly heavy, bank vault-like steel door shut behind them just as a terrifying wave of intense noise and palpable pressure washed over the structure. A chaotic, deafening symphony composed of the tornado's core roaring directly overhead like 1,000 jet engines, the tortured shriek of nearby metal structures being torn apart, the explosive sound of shattering glass from the community center windows, and the sickeningly percussive, rhythmic impact of heavy, unknown debris, tree limbs, roofing materials, perhaps pieces of cars, slamming violently, repeatedly against the shelter's thick concrete walls and roof. The ground beneath their feet seemed to vibrate violently, shaking the entire structure. Patricia Dunn, however, hadn't immediately followed them into the designated shelter. Caught up in her indignation, furious at the perceived assault on her vehicle, she had momentarily hesitated near the now partially blocked ramp entrance. As the others scrambled inside, she took a defiant step away from the main steel door, perhaps intending to march over to the other, non-accessible side entrance with the steps, as if to prove a point about her own self-sufficiency and the others' needless panic. She brushed a muddy leaf off her expensive jacket, glaring at the closed shelter door. Ridiculous overreaction, she muttered bitterly to her terrified dog clutched in her arms, just as the full, terrifying force of the tornadic wind struck the community center complex head-on. Inside the cramped, suddenly pitch-black, windowless safe room, terrified residents huddled tightly together in the oppressive darkness, the sudden loss of the flickering emergency lights adding a new layer of fear. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, wet clothes, and raw fear. The only illumination came from the frantic, dancing beams of a few emergency hand-crank flashlights and the eerie, blue-white glow of cell phone screens held aloft, casting distorted shadows on pale, frightened faces. The roar outside was deafening now, overwhelming, a physical presence that seemed to press in on them relentlessly from all sides, vibrating through the concrete floor into the soles of their shoes. The rapid, intense pressure changes made everyone's ears pop painfully, repeatedly. Small children cried uncontrollably, their sounds muffled against their parents' trembling chests. Someone whimpered softly, uncontrollably, in a dark corner. Prayers were whispered urgently. Mia, though visibly frightened, her small knuckles white as she gripped her wheelchair armrests tightly, reached out a small, trembling hand to find Ben's in the suffocating dark. He grasped it instantly, tightly, grounding himself perhaps as much as her, squeezing back reassuringly. His heart was pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird trying to escape. His meteorologist brain, almost on autopilot, automatically ran through complex probabilities, mentally estimated peak wind speeds based on the terrifying sounds assaulting them, calculated potential damage paths through their neighborhood, even while he tried desperately, consciously, to project an aura of calm, of reassurance, for his daughter, for Chloe, for everyone packed shoulder to shoulder into the small, vibrating space. Leadership in crisis. The entire shelter structure vibrated intensely, continuously now, the solid reinforced concrete groaning and creaking audibly under the unimaginable, sustained assault. protesting the incredible aerodynamic forces trying relentlessly to tear it apart. Small bits of dust and concrete debris sifted down from the ceiling vents, raining lightly on their heads. It felt like an eternity spent trapped inside a giant, shaking industrial drum being pounded relentlessly by colossal hammers wielded by an angry god. In reality, the passage of the tornado's most intense, destructive core likely lasted only a terrifying minute or two, maybe even less. 60 seconds of pure, primal terror. Then, almost as suddenly, as abruptly as it had begun, the intense, deafening, soul-shaking roar began to recede noticeably, moving off to the northeast, replaced almost instantly by the comparatively mundane sound of torrential rain hammering violently against the concrete roof and the unsettling, persistent dripping of water from somewhere inside the now-damaged structure. The extreme pressure differential rapidly equalized, leaving a strange, ringing silence in its wake, broken only by the sound of the rain and shaky, relieved breaths. After a few more tense, uncertain minutes of relative quiet, punctuated only by a few lingering frightened sobs, hushed whispers of, "Is it over?" and the occasional nervous cough, Bill Henderson, the retired firefighter whose calm presence had been a steadying force, cautiously, slowly cracked open the heavy steel door just an inch, peering out into the radically changed world outside. The scene that greeted them was one of chaotic, almost unbelievable, widespread destruction. The torrential rain was still falling heavily, sheeting down relentlessly, but the violent, rotating wind had clearly passed them by. Familiar, mature oak trees that had stood sentinel in the community park for decades were snapped cleanly in half like dry twigs, their splintered, pale trunks stark and violated against the gloomy gray sky. Large sections of roofing torn from nearby houses littered the community center lawn like giant, carelessly discarded playing cards, exposing rafters and ruined insulation beneath. Unrecognizable debris, twisted, mangled pieces of metal siding, clumps of pink fiberglass insulation, shattered pieces of pressure-treated wood, unrecognizable pieces of plastic furniture, even a battered barbecue grill, was strewn everywhere, tangled and chaotic, forming grotesque piles against anything still standing. A thick, slick layer of mud and pulverized leaves coated everything, giving the landscape a surreal, almost monochromatic appearance. And there, perhaps 20 yards away from the now-open shelter entrance, easily visible even through the driving rain, lying ignominiously on its side like a wounded, metallic beast put out of its misery, was Patricia Dunn's once gleaming, expensive white luxury SUV. Its windows were completely smashed out, leaving gaping holes. The roof was deeply dented and buckled inwards, crushed as if by a giant fist. The expensive, custom paint job was horrifically scratched, gouged, and stripped in places down to bare metal. It was clearly, unequivocally, spectacularly, a total loss. A piece of instantaneous, karmic automotive justice delivered by Mother Nature. Faintly at first, muffled by the rain, then growing steadily louder, the welcome sound of approaching sirens could finally be heard as the first wave of emergency vehicles began carefully, slowly navigating the debris-choked streets of Oak Ridge. Ben, seeing the familiar flashing red and blue lights of police cruisers and heavy fire trucks picking their way cautiously through the destruction towards the community center, took a deep, steadying breath of the rain-washed air and stepped fully out of the humid, crowded confines of the concrete sanctuary into the ravaged landscape of his neighborhood. His neighbors were emerging too, slowly, hesitantly, blinking in the gray daylight, their faces universally dazed, pale with shock and adrenaline hangover, but overwhelmingly, visibly relieved to be mostly physically unharmed. They murmured quietly amongst themselves, pointing at the shocking scope of the damage, expressing disbelief, but also profound gratitude for the sturdiness of the reinforced refuge that had saved them. He saw Patricia Dunn stumbling near her overturned vehicle, miraculously, almost unfairly, physically unhurt aside from a few scratches and bruises, but utterly disheveled, soaked, and mud-splattered. Her expensive clothes were torn and muddy, her perfect blonde hair plastered haphazardly to her face in wet clumps, her expression a volatile, ugly mixture of profound shock, sputtering disbelief, and rising, impotent fury as she surveyed the flattened wreckage of her prized, status symbol possession. Her small dog was nowhere in sight initially, likely having fled in terror during the impact. A fire captain, Mike Riley, a man Ben knew well and respected from years of coordinating countywide emergency planning meetings and joint NWS Fire Department severe weather drills, spotted him immediately through the driving rain. "Ben, thank God. You okay? Your wife? Your daughter?" he yelled, jogging towards him, his face grim but relieved. "What's the situation here?" Dispatch got reports this area took a direct, hard hit. Ben instantly shifted back into professional mode, the familiar cadence and terminology of emergency response falling easily into place, a comforting structure amidst the chaos. "Captain Riley," he acknowledged, his voice clear and steady now, projecting over the rain. "Good to see your crews arriving. We're all okay in the shelter, accounted for. We took a significant glancing blow right here. Looks like primarily from the southeast quadrant of the main tornadic circulation, based on the debris fall patterns observed and the intense inflow winds we experienced just before impact." He pointed southwest, then northeast, indicating the likely path. Track was roughly northeast right across this section of Oak Ridge. Intensity felt like a strong YEF 1, possibly reaching low-end YEF 2 right here at the community center complex, based on the observed structural damage, the complete destruction of those mature hardwood trees, and the extent of roof removals on the houses just north of our location. The main, most intense tornadic circulation likely passed just north of us, maybe by only a few hundred yards. He concisely relayed his expert, real-time assessment of the tornado's track, estimated intensity range, and precise time of passage, critical ground truth information vital for Captain Riley's crews in coordinating targeted search and rescue efforts throughout the wider affected residential area. As he spoke, a uniformed police officer approached them, his notepad protected by a clear plastic cover despite the pouring rain, beginning the necessary, methodical process of taking initial statements from witnesses. Several neighbors immediately, almost eagerly, turned and pointed directly towards Patricia Dunn, who was now attempting to pry open a jammed door on her overturned SUV. They began recounting loudly, angrily, simultaneously, how she had deliberately, stubbornly blocked the sole accessible ramp to the safety structure with her vehicle, how she had arrogantly refused to move even as the tornado bore down directly on them. Bill Henderson added his firm, booming confirmation, describing the desperate, last-second physical effort required by several residents to push the heavy SUV even partially out of the way, emphasizing how close they came to bay. Being trapped outside, Ben retrieved his slightly battered smartphone from his jacket pocket. The screen was cracked badly, spiderwebbed across the glass from being pressed against something hard during the frantic scramble into the shelter, but the video recording function, miraculously, was intact and had captured the crucial moments. He showed the patiently listening police officer the clear, damning video footage playing back on the damaged screen. Patricia standing defiantly by her gleaming white SUV, which was explicitly, undeniably blocking the painted accessible ramp. Her sharp, dismissive refusal to move despite the wailing sirens, the terrifying sky, and Ben's clear, official warning about directly endangering residents. The audio captured her exact words. Patricia, overhearing the neighbor's angry accusations and seeing Ben holding up the phone displaying the incriminating video footage to the officer, finally seemed to grasp the legal jeopardy she was in. She abandoned her attempts to salvage anything from the wreck and launched into a high-pitched, tearful, defensive tirade, gesturing wildly, erratically towards her overturned vehicle. "It's not my fault. It's absolutely not my fault," she wailed, her voice cracking with a mixture of genuine panic and practiced indignation. The storm came much, much faster than they said on the Weather Channel. It wasn't supposed to be here yet. And she pointed accusingly, viciously, at Ben and Bill Henderson, damaged my car. They assaulted me. They illegally tried to move it without my permission. They probably weakened it and caused it to tip over in the wind. I'm the victim here. My beautiful, expensive vehicle is destroyed. It cost over $80,000. I'll sue everyone." The police officer listened patiently, his expression remaining carefully neutral, unreadable beneath the brim of his rain-soaked cap. He calmly finished writing his detailed notes, incorporating the video evidence description. Then, he tore off a formal citation from his pad and handed it firmly, deliberately, into Patricia Dunn's outstretched, trembling hand. This is a criminal citation for reckless endangerment, a Class A misdemeanor, and for willful obstruction of access to a designated public emergency shelter during a declared emergency, a violation of State Statute 38B, he stated calmly, his voice professional but firm, brooking no argument. You'll have a mandatory court appearance date, ma'am. All the details, including the date, time, and courthouse location, are clearly printed on the summons. He paused, looking pointedly from the citation back to the mangled, overturned wreck. You're free to go for now, obviously, but I strongly wouldn't advise attempting to drive this vehicle anywhere. He gestured towards the totaled SUV with a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, before turning politely to take detailed statements from Bill Henderson and the other witnesses who had pushed the car. Patricia stared down at the official citation clutched in her hand, as if it were printed in a completely foreign language she couldn't comprehend. Her mouth opened and closed silently for a moment, her face contorted with a mixture of fury, disbelief, and dawning horror. She crumpled the paper slightly in her fist, shot a final venomous glare at the circle of disapproving, accusing faces of her neighbors, turned her back abruptly on them and the officers, and began stumbling away awkwardly through the deepening mud and scattered debris towards her likely damaged home several blocks away, her small, terrified dog suddenly reappearing from under a bush and running, yapping indignantly, at her heels. News crews, navigating the heavily blocked streets with considerable difficulty, using satellite trucks equipped for rough terrain, arrived on the scene soon after the first wave of responders had secured the area. They captured dramatic, compelling footage of the widespread, devastating damage across Oakridge, the poignant images of relieved survivors emerging tearfully from the sturdy community shelter, and, featured prominently in several reports, Ben Carter, the state's calm, knowledgeable, and now personally impacted meteorologist, expertly briefing fire captains and police commanders amidst the chaotic debris field of his very own neighborhood, providing crucial context, scientific analysis, and reassurance. They also, inevitably, caught compelling, instantly viral footage of Patricia Dunn arguing heatedly, almost hysterically, tearfully, with the patient police officer near her overturned, wrecked SUV. Her increasingly shrill, out-of-touch complaints about scratched custom paint, ruined Italian leather upholstery, and potential lawsuits sounded utterly absurd, profoundly jarring, and deeply offensive against the stark backdrop of real, significant destruction, snapped mature trees, heavily damaged homes missing roofs and walls, and the shared, collective trauma of survival palpable in the air. The story, powerfully featuring the dramatic video from Ben's phone capturing the obstruction and refusal, combined with multiple compelling eyewitness accounts from grateful neighbors, quickly gained significant traction online and dominated evening news broadcasts across the state and even nationally. Ben's quick thinking in documenting the obstruction, combined with the desperate, collective actions of his neighbors to physically clear the path just in the nick of time for Mia and numerous others, were widely highlighted, lauded as acts of genuine heroism, community spirit, and basic human decency prevailing under extreme pressure. Patricia Dunn, conversely, became an instant, widely reviled online symbol of dangerous selfish entitlement, breathtaking arrogance, and shocking indifference in the face of a deadly natural disaster. The hashtags #RampRage, #Oakridge Karen, and #ParkingLotPatty trended briefly but intensely on social media platforms. Later that same day, the governor's official Twitter account posted a strongly worded message that effectively sealed Patricia's public fate and potentially influenced legal proceedings. Deeply disturbed by reports from Oakridge, commending the bravery and quick thinking of Oakridge residents and the professional, calm action of state meteorologist Ben Carter, a true weather hero dad, ensuring community safety during today's dangerous tornado event. Obstruction of designated public emergency shelters is unacceptable, illegal, and selfishly endangers precious lives. Rest assured, those responsible for such reckless behavior will be held fully accountable under state law. The message was retweeted thousands of times within hours, amplifying the public condemnation. The final, financially devastating blow for Patricia Dunn, adding significant insult to her already considerable injury, came a few days later, delivered via certified registered mail requiring her signature. Her high-end auto insurance company, having conducted its own swift and thorough internal investigation, meticulously reviewing the official police reports citing her criminal actions, multiple corroborating sworn witness statements detailing her willful refusal to move, the widely circulated and undeniable video footage clearly showing her deliberate obstruction, the governor's unambiguous public statement condemning the act, and, most importantly, the relevant fine print clauses within her own expensive auto insurance policy, sent her a formal, legally vetted letter informing her of their decision. Her comprehensive claim for her totaled luxury SUV, valued at over $80,000, was summarily, unequivocally denied. The letter specifically, pointedly cited the standard policy clause excluding coverage for any damage or loss incurred directly or indirectly as a result of gross negligence, willful endangerment of others, or the commission of illegal acts by the policyholder. Her deliberate, documented obstruction of a designated emergency shelter pathway during a life-threatening, officially declared emergency event, which led directly to her vehicle being left in the path of the tornado, unequivocally voided her coverage entirely. She would receive absolutely nothing from the insurance company for the destroyed vehicle. She was completely on her own. In the following weeks and months, the resilient community of Oak Ridge began the slow, arduous, emotionally taxing process of cleaning up, healing psychologically, and physically rebuilding their damaged neighborhood. Miraculously, due perhaps to the timely, accurate warnings and the structural integrity of the community shelter, there had been no fatalities or serious, life-threatening injuries reported within the town limits, a fact for which everyone felt profoundly grateful. Community spirit, initially frayed by the terror, unexpectedly soared as neighbors helped neighbors clear massive fallen trees, temporarily patch damaged roofs with tarps, share generators and resources, cook communal meals, and offer crucial emotional support, forging stronger bonds through shared adversity. Ben, Chloe, and especially Mia were genuinely overwhelmed by the outpouring of goodwill, warmth, hugs, baked goods, and sincere gratitude from their neighbors, many of whom explicitly, emotionally thanked them. Ben for his warnings and documentation, Chloe for her calm presence, and Mia for being the catalyst that spurred the desperate action, for ensuring the shelter was accessible, even by a narrow margin, when mere seconds had clearly mattered most between safety and potential tragedy. Patricia Dunn, facing significant criminal charges for reckless endangerment, to which she eventually pleaded no contest, receiving probation and hefty fines. Ongoing, fruitless legal battles with her insurance company over the firmly denied claim, and the complete, icy, unanimous ostracization of her former community. Neighbors literally crossed the street to avoid her. Former friends stopped returning her calls. HOA board members formally censured her and refused her participation. Quickly put her large, mostly undamaged house up for sale at a significantly reduced price through an out-of-town realtor, and prepared to leave Oak Ridge permanently in disgrace, her reputation shattered, her finances depleted. The wide, smooth, concrete pathway leading to the community storm shelter remained clear now, meticulously unobstructed at all times, a silent, potent, enduring testament to the terrifying day the residents of Oak Ridge collectively chose cooperation over callousness, accessibility over arrogance, community survival over corrosive self-interest. A lesson learned the hardest way possible. Mia Carter, safe and sound, her bright spirit undimmed by the ordeal, often sat near Ben in his home office now, watching him intently as he tracked new weather systems developing and moving across the country on his bank of glowing monitors. She was a small, resilient, cherished symbol of exactly why his demanding, often stressful work mattered so profoundly, both professionally to the countless unseen people across the state who relied on his forecasts for their safety, and deeply, fundamentally, personally, right there in his own home, in his own neighborhood, embodied in the brave girl beside him. The terrifying roar of the tornado had eventually faded into a haunting memory, but the strength, the resilience, the kindness, and the renewed unity of their recovering community echoed louder, clearer and much more hopefully than ever before in the clean, rain-washed autumn air.